Welcome to Smarter Sleeping. Tonight, we drift beyond the veil of everyday thought, into a realm where the mind stretches and the ordinary dissolves into wonder. These are paradoxes, truths that contradict themselves, puzzles that resist easy answers, and ideas that invite the quiet unraveling of what we think we know. As you fall asleep, allow these questions to gently pull at the threads of logic and certainty. Let your breathing slow, your body rest, and your thoughts expand like ripples across a still pond. You don't need to remember everything. The point is not to solve the mystery, but to feel it, to exist with it. Before we begin, leave a comment with the time and your location. It's a small ritual, a way to let go of the day, release the last bit of energy, and signal that you're ready to drift. Once you do, I'll guide you the rest of the way. And now our first paradox begins. The paradox we're about to explore is called the twin paradox. Imagine you have a twin. The two of you are born at the same moment, identical in age, appearance, and biology. You grow up side by side, until one day your twin boards a spacecraft and travels far into space at a speed near the speed of light, while you remain on Earth. Years pass, and when your twin finally returns, you are stunned to find that they have barely aged, while you, still standing on Earth, are now decades older. How is that possible? This is the twin paradox, a cornerstone of Einstein's theory of relativity, and one of the most reality-bending concepts in all of modern physics. At first glance, the paradox seems impossible. Time is supposed to be constant, isn't it? A clock ticks at the same pace for everyone, but the universe doesn't work that way. As Einstein showed, time is not fixed. It can bend, it can stretch, it can slow down. According to the theory of special relativity, time slows down the faster you move. The closer you get to the speed of light, the more time dilates. That is, the more time stretches. For the twin traveling through space at incredible speeds, time slows to a crawl. From their perspective, only a few years may pass. But for the twin on Earth, time continues normally. Decades tick by. This isn't just a thought experiment. Time dilation has been proven. Atomic clocks on high-speed jets tick ever so slightly slower than those on the ground. Satellites orbiting Earth, like the ones used in your GPS, have to be constantly corrected for time dilation. If they weren't, your navigation system would drift out of sync in just a matter of days. So why is this a paradox? Because motion is relative. If you're in a spaceship moving away from Earth, you could just as easily say that Earth is moving away from you. So why should you be the one aging slower? The answer lies in acceleration. The twin on the spacecraft doesn't just move at a constant speed. They accelerate to reach that speed. They decelerate to turn around. And they accelerate again to return home. This breaks the symmetry. The earthbound twin remains in a consistent frame of reference, while the traveling twin changes frames. That change, that acceleration, is what causes the time difference. Still, the implications are staggering. Time, this constant we live by, is not so constant after all. It flows differently depending on where you are and how fast you're moving. And this isn't science fiction. It's measurable. It's real. But what does that mean for us? It means that aging itself is relative. It means that two people born at the same moment can live completely different durations depending on how they move through space. It means that time, the great equalizer, is actually flexible. Philosophically, it opens a door to strange questions. What is identity if time itself can be stretched? If memory depends on the passage of time, how do two twins, separated by relativity, remember the same childhood from such different ages. And deeper still, if time can stretch, could it one day reverse? Could we fold it, bend it, step outside of it entirely? In science fiction, time travel often seems like fantasy, but the twin paradox shows that time travel into the future is not only possible, it's happening. It just requires speed. Still, the real magic of this paradox lies not in its utility, but in its quiet reminder. The universe is far more strange and wondrous than our senses tell us. We were born into a world of steady clocks and rising suns. But the cosmos, the true nature of space and time, is anything but simple. So as you lay here now, slowly drifting into sleep, let this paradox unfold in your dreams. Imagine what it feels like to return home to a world that has raced ahead without you, to see your reflection aged in another but not in yourself, to step outside the river of time, if only briefly. Not everything is meant to be resolved. Some mysteries are meant to be felt. Let's continue. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Sororites Paradox, also known as the Paradox of the Heap. Let's begin with something deceptively simple. You have a pile of sand, a heap. If you remove a single grain from that heap, it's still a heap. Now remove another grain. Still a heap. One more, still a heap. But what happens if you keep doing this, removing just one grain at a time? At what point does it stop being a heap? And if removing a single grain never makes the difference, does that mean even a single grain of sand still counts as a heap? This is the Sororites Paradox. It challenges how we define things that don't have clear boundaries. We live by categories. We sort the world into neat boxes, hot or cold, rich or poor, young or old. But many of these categories are fuzzy. There's no single point where the switch flips, and that fuzziness can unravel logic. Let's return to the sand. Start with 1,000 grains. Clearly a heap, remove one. Still a heap, remove another. Again, still a heap. Repeat that process. And somehow, one day, you're left with a single grain, still logically classified as a heap, if you follow the rule that one grain can't make the difference. But that can't be right. So where's the flaw? Some say the problem is with language. Words like heap are vague, and logic doesn't handle vagueness well. Others say the problem is with our logic, and maybe we need new kinds of logic that can deal with fuzziness. Still others argue that this isn't just a word game. It reflects something true about how reality works. Because this paradox doesn't just apply to sand. Ask yourself, at what point does a person become bald? When does a person become old? How many dollars make someone rich? When does a few drops of water become a puddle? These aren't math problems. They're everyday mysteries. This has real-world consequences. In ethics, if each action causes only a tiny harm, but the result is massive, at what point does it become morally wrong? In law, when does a joke become slander? When does self-defense become assault? In medicine, when does forgetfulness become dementia? When do cells become a human life? The Sororites Paradox shows us how the lines we live by often aren't lines at all. They're gradients. They blur. They slip. It even touches your sense of identity. You're made of atoms. Those atoms change. Your cells regenerate. Your memories evolve. Are you the same person you were 5 years ago? 10 years ago? If you change one thing at a time, when does the you you know, become someone new? The truth is, there may not be a moment. Change is constant, but it's slow, imperceptible, one grain at a time. And maybe that's the point. The Sororites paradox reminds us that transformation rarely announces itself. We shift quietly, gradually, without knowing it. In Buddhism, this echoes the idea of impermanence, that everything is in motion, that nothing holds still. In science, it resonates with quantum theory, where particles don't behave in fixed ways until observed. In psychology, it reveals how perception builds from blurry boundaries. And here, in this moment, as you lie still, drifting deeper into sleep, you are also changing, breath by breath, thought by thought, not in leaps, but in grains. You're not fully awake. You're not fully asleep. You're somewhere in between, just like the heap. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't need sharp lines. Maybe some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only experienced. Let's continue. The paradox we're about to explore is known as the Bootstrap Paradox. It begins with a story. A scientist living in the year 2300 is obsessed with music from the 20th century. She's fascinated by a composer named Johann Sebastian Bach. But in her version of history, Bach's music was lost. It never survived. No recordings, no sheet music, nothing. So she does something extraordinary. She builds a time machine. She travels back to the year 1740, and she brings with her all the original scores, every note Bach was ever known for. When she arrives, she finds a young composer struggling with inspiration. She hands him the music. He studies it. He plays it. He publishes it. That composer is Johann Sebastian Bach. Centuries later, the scientist grows up listening to Bach's work, the same work she gave him in the past, the same work he supposedly created. So here's the question. Where did the music actually come from? That's the Bootstrap Paradox. It happens when something, an object, a piece of information, or a work of art, is sent back in time and becomes the very thing that causes itself to exist. There's no origin, no point of creation. The thing loops endlessly. It exists because it exists. This paradox gets its name from the phrase, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, a metaphor for doing something impossible. Just like an object that appears in history without ever being made. It challenges everything we think we know about cause and effect. In a normal timeline, causes come before effects. Events follow a direction. One thing leads to the next. But the Bootstrap Paradox breaks that chain. It creates a loop. The effect becomes its own cause. The origin vanishes. And the question remains, can something exist without ever being created? Let's try another example. Imagine a future engineer who discovers blueprints for a time machine. They build it, they use it. And at some point, they go back in time and hand those blueprints to their younger self. That younger self becomes the future engineer. They build the same machine, repeat. Where did the blueprints come from? Not from either version of the engineer. They came from nowhere. That's what makes the Bootstrap Paradox so unsettling. It seems to violate the basic rules of logic. Rules like causality, the idea that every effect must have a cause. In this paradox, the cause and the effect feed each other. They form a closed loop, a cycle that has no beginning and no end. Philosophers call this a causal loop. Physicists wonder whether time itself could allow for such loops under extreme conditions like wormholes or closed time-like curves. Science fiction loves this idea. From Doctor Who to Interstellar to Predestination, characters send information or objects back in time that ultimately shape the future and the past. But the deeper you look, the more it dissolves. Where does anything truly begin? How do you define the original source? Can knowledge or art simply exist because it was passed between moments in time? If you learned something from a book, then traveled back and gave that book to its original author, did they really create it, or did you, or did no one? These aren't just games. They get at the heart of existence, at the nature of reality. Because if time travel is ever possible, then paradoxes like this might not just be theories. They might be real. But there's another layer, a quieter one, because the Bootstrap Paradox also asks, does everything need an origin? Or are some things, ideas, love, beauty, meant to simply exist, to echo between minds, across time, without needing a single point of birth? As you listen now, drifting deeper, your mind might start to loop, to wander through cause and effect. That's okay. Let it wander. Let it drift. No need to trace every thread. Some knots are meant to remain. Some answers are meant to be felt, not found. Let's continue. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Liar's Paradox. It begins with a sentence, just one. I am lying. That's it. 3 simple words. And yet they unravel logic completely. Because if the sentence is true, then the speaker is lying, which would make the sentence false. But if the sentence is false, then the speaker isn't lying, which would mean the sentence is true. And now you're caught in a loop. This is the Liar's Paradox, a self-referential statement that collapses in on itself. It doesn't resolve, it doesn't break, it just spins, a linguistic black hole. This paradox has existed for thousands of years. The earliest known version comes from the Greek philosopher Epimenides, who said, all Cretans are liars, and he was a Cretan. So if he was telling the truth, then he was lying. And if he was lying, then maybe he was telling the truth. No matter how you try to untangle it, you fall back into the loop. This is not just a clever word game. It exposes a deeper issue, the instability of self-reference. When a sentence refers to itself in a way that affects its own truth value, the entire system breaks. It's like a sign that says, ignore this sign, or a book that contains the sentence, everything in this book is false. If it's true, then it must be false, but if it's false, then maybe it's true. The contradiction feeds itself. It's the paradox of a snake eating its own tail. In logic and mathematics, this problem caused real trouble. In the early 20th century, mathematicians tried to build a perfect, complete system of logic, a flawless structure where everything made sense. But paradoxes like this kept slipping through. And then came Kurt Gödel. He showed that in any logical system complex enough to do basic math, there will always be statements that are true, but can't be proven. In other words, paradox is inevitable. The Liar's Paradox isn't just annoying, it's foundational. It's a crack in the floorboards of logic, and it appears everywhere. In computer science, self-replicating programs can create feedback loops. In linguistics, self-reference leads to endless recursion. In philosophy, it questions whether truth can exist inside a system that describes itself. And in consciousness, we face a similar mystery. Can the mind truly understand itself? Can the observer fully observe the thing doing the observing? If I say, I don't believe anything I say, should you believe me? Can a system truly explain itself, or is it always chasing its own tail? Now let's slow things down, because even as this paradox plays games with reason, there's something soothing in the spiral. You don't have to solve it. Just feel the rhythm of the contradiction. The way each answer leads back to its opposite. The way certainty slips away. Let it go. Some truths resist clarity. Some ideas are beautiful precisely because they won't resolve. Like a dream you can't quite explain, or a sentence that undoes itself the moment you believe it. Let your mind wrap around the loop. Let it coil softly into stillness. There is no resolution. And maybe that's the point. But if you're still awake, here's something to untangle. If someone says this sentence is false, do you believe them? Leave your thoughts in the comments, unless that too is a paradox. The end. The paradox we're about to explore is known as the Ship of Theseus. It starts with a ship, an old wooden vessel sailing across the Aegean Sea. Piece by piece, the wood begins to rot, so the sailors replace it, one plank at a time. Over the years, every single part of the ship is removed and replaced with new materials, until one day not a single piece of the original ship remains. And now the question, is it still the same ship? That's the Ship of Theseus paradox, a puzzle about identity, continuity, and what it really means to remain yourself over time. But it doesn't end there. Let's take it further. Imagine that every plank removed from the original ship was stored in a warehouse, and later those original planks are reassembled into a second ship, built exactly the same. Now, which one is the real Ship of Theseus, the one that continued to sail, but was completely replaced? Or the one that was rebuilt from the original parts, but never left the dock? This paradox raises a quiet, powerful question. What defines something's true identity? Is it the physical parts, or the continuity of experience, the materials, or the story? Let's bring it closer to home. Think about your own body. You are made of cells, and those cells constantly die and regenerate. In fact, almost every cell in your body will be replaced over the course of 7 to 10 years. You are not the same collection of atoms you were a decade ago, and yet you're still you. A continuous thread of memory, personality, experience. So what's more real, your body or your identity? Now apply it to relationships. A couple grows together for decades. They change jobs, appearances, beliefs. They become different people, and yet they remain together. Is it still the same relationship, or something entirely new that kept the same name? This paradox shows up in technology too. When you repair a car piece by piece, or upgrade your phone until no original parts remain, is it still the same device? In law, this matters. In philosophy, it matters. In neuroscience, it matters. And in your own sense of self, it matters. Because we cling to identity. We want things to stay the same, to be solid, to endure. But the truth is, everything changes. Everything evolves. Everything is rebuilt, even the things we think are permanent. The paradox doesn't force an answer. Instead, it invites a perspective shift. Maybe identity isn't fixed. Maybe it's something we carry forward, even as everything else is replaced. Maybe what matters is not the parts, but the pattern, the shape, the idea. The Ship of Theseus keeps sailing, not because its boards are the same, but because its journey continues. And maybe That's all identity is. A story we choose to keep telling. So as you breathe in now, and let the air gently leave your body, feel the quiet truth of that. You are not made of the same pieces you once were, and yet you are still here, sailing forward. But if you're still awake, here's something to drift on. If your memories could be transferred to a new body, plank by plank, would that person still be you? Tell me in the comments if you haven't changed too much already. The paradox we're about to explore is known as the Dichotomy Paradox. Imagine this. To walk across a room, you must first reach the halfway point. Before you reach that halfway point, you must reach the quarter mark. Before that, the 8th mark, then the 16th, and so on. Before you can reach any destination, you must reach half the distance first. But there's always another half to go. And if there are an infinite number of halfway points between where you are and where you're going, how do you ever arrive at all? This is the Dichotomy Paradox, one of Zeno's ancient puzzles of motion, a challenge to our most basic understanding of how we move through space and time. It seems obvious that you can cross a room. You do it every day. But according to this paradox, every action requires completing an infinite number of tasks. And that seems impossible. How can you finish an infinite number of steps in a finite amount of time? Let's break it down. Say the distance is 10 meters. To reach the wall, you must first walk 5 meters, then 2.5 meters, then 1.25, then another half. Each step is smaller than the last, but there are infinitely many. So how do we ever finish the walk? In mathematics, this is where infinite series come in. It turns out that the sum of all those shrinking steps can actually add up to a finite number. Just like how the infinite decimal 0.999 repeating equals 1, an infinite sequence of smaller and smaller distances can converge to a final point. But Zeno's paradox isn't about math alone. It's about perception. It's about how infinity fits into the real world. We can't see infinity. We can't touch it, and yet it's hidden in every movement we make. When you lift a finger, you pass through uncountable points in space. When you blink, your eye moves across infinite subdivisions. And you never notice. Because motion just works, even though logic says it shouldn't. This paradox lives in that contradiction between what we experience and what our reasoning tells us is possible. It also speaks to our experience of progress. How often do we feel like we're not getting anywhere because there's always more to go? We reach halfway to our goal, but the goal moves. We do one task and find another waiting. We improve, we grow, we change, but there's no finish line. The Dichotomy Paradox reminds us that's not a flaw in the journey. It is the journey. Progress is made in smaller and smaller steps. Sometimes it feels like you'll never get there. But just like the paradox, each step matters. Each tiny move adds up. And one day, without even realizing it, you arrive. Infinity didn't stop you. It carried you forward. As you lie here, letting your thoughts slow, let this paradox soften your striving. You don't need to conquer everything at once. You don't need to take giant leaps. Tiny steps are enough. Even steps so small, they feel invisible. Let your breath be the motion. Let your stillness be the arrival. But if you're still awake, here's a thought to walk with. If between every point there is always another, does motion even exist? Or is it just an illusion we experience? One halfway step at a time? Let me know in the comments if you ever make it there. The paradox we're about to explore is known as the Paradox of Choice. It seems like a good thing, doesn't it? Choice, the freedom, options, the more the better. Or at least, that's what we've always been told. But what if having more choices doesn't make us happier? What if it makes us more anxious, less satisfied, and more likely to regret whatever we decide? That's the paradox of choice. The idea that while some choice is good, too much choice becomes overwhelming. Imagine standing in front of a grocery store shelf. You just want some olive oil. But there are 30 brands: glass bottles, plastic bottles, cold-pressed, organic, imported, infused with garlic, with herbs, with lemon. Your brain stalls. You read labels. You compare prices. You worry about making the wrong decision. And when you finally choose one, you don't feel joy. You feel uncertainty. Did you pick the best one? What did you miss out on? That's the paradox. We believe more options will give us more control. But in practice, they often lead to more doubt, more fear of missing out, more regret. Psychologist Barry Schwartz popularized this idea in his book, The Paradox of Choice. He found that when people are presented with more options, in shopping, dating, careers, even healthcare, they tend to be less satisfied with whatever they choose. Why? Because when you have too many paths, you feel more responsible for the outcome. If you only had one or two choices, you'd blame the circumstances if things went wrong. But when you had dozens of options, you blame yourself. You think, I should have known. I should have chosen better. And even when things turn out well, you wonder, what if there was something better out there? This can lead to analysis paralysis. You weigh every detail, every possibility, and you become stuck, afraid to choose, afraid to commit. But the real cost is peace, the ability to be content, to move forward without always looking back. The paradox of choice touches every part of life. In love, where endless dating apps offer infinite potential matches, but no clear answers. In careers, where more freedom can lead to more pressure to find the perfect job. In lifestyle, where every decision, from phone plans to travel destinations, feels like a trap of opportunity. The more we can do, the more we fear doing the wrong thing. And in that fear, we sometimes choose nothing, which is still a choice, but there's another path: gratitude, sufficiency, letting go, because sometimes peace doesn't come from picking the best thing. It comes from choosing and then allowing that choice to be enough. As you relax now, let that idea settle in. You don't need all the answers. You don't need every possibility. You just need one clear breath, one moment of stillness, one path forward. That is enough. But if you're still awake, here's a question to consider. If you could live 1,000 different lives, each one with a different choice you didn't make, would you want to know how each one turned out? Let me know in the comments. If you can decide. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Barber Paradox. It sounds simple at first, even silly. But beneath the surface, it challenges the very logic we use to define rules, systems, and self-reference. The setup goes like this. In a small town, there is a barber, and this barber follows one very specific rule. He shaves everyone in town. Who does not shave themselves That's it. If you shave yourself, the barber leaves you alone. If you don't shave yourself, the barber takes care of it for you. So far, so good. But now the question, who shaves the barber? If the barber shaves himself, then by definition, he shouldn't be shaved by the barber, because he only shaves people who don't shave themselves. But if he doesn't shave himself, then by the town's rule, he must be shaved by the barber, which is himself. Either option leads to a contradiction. This is the barber paradox proposed by British philosopher and logician Bertrand Russell. It's a paradox of self-reference, a system that collapses when it tries to apply its own rules to itself. It seems funny at first, like a riddle with no answer, but it reveals something deeper about logic and systems. Russell originally devised this paradox to illustrate a major problem in set theory. In mathematics, sets are used to group things. But what happens if you have a set that contains all sets that do not contain themselves? Should that master set include itself or not? Just like the barber. It creates a contradiction either way. This led to what became known as Russell's paradox, and it forced mathematicians to rethink the foundations of logic. They had to rebuild how sets and systems were defined to prevent self-referential loops that destroyed consistency. But beyond math, the paradox invites a more philosophical question. What happens when a rule tries to apply to itself? What happens when a system tries to define itself from within? Can a law govern itself? Can a brain fully understand its own thinking? Can language completely define itself without contradiction? These aren't just logical puzzles. They show up in real life. In bureaucracy, where departments regulate each other, until no one's quite sure who has the final authority. In AI, where algorithms try to monitor other algorithms and end up caught in loops. Even in personal identity, when we try to define ourselves using labels, and then question whether those labels apply. The barber paradox is a mirror turned inward, a system eating its own tail, and it humbles us, because it shows that not every question has a neat answer. Some rules break when you try to use them too perfectly, and maybe that's a useful kind of broken, because not all logic leads to truth. And not all systems lead to understanding. Some lead to silence, to pause, to paradox. So as you rest here, let that loop soften in your mind. Don't try to solve it. Let it stay unresolved, unfinished. Like a joke without a punchline, or a story that ends exactly where it began. But if you're still awake, here's a question that might shave off your sleep. If you follow the rules, and the rules break themselves, are you still following the rules? Let me know what you think. Unless, of course, you're the barber. The paradox we're about to explore is called the unexpected hanging paradox. It begins with a prisoner. He's told by the judge, "You will be hanged at noon on one weekday next week. But the day of the hanging will be a surprise to you. You will not know which day it is until the executioner arrives." The prisoner thinks about this, and then he smiles. He believes he's just discovered a way to escape his fate. If I haven't been hanged by Thursday, he reasons, then it must happen on Friday. But if I know it has to be Friday, then it won't be a surprise. So they can't hang me on Friday. Then he considers Thursday. If Friday is ruled out, and I haven't been hanged by Wednesday, then Thursday is the only option left. But I'd know that in advance too. So Thursday is ruled out. He continues this backward reasoning all the way to Monday and concludes, The hanging can't happen at all. But then on Wednesday, the executioner arrives, and the prisoner is completely surprised. The paradox is complete. This is the unexpected hanging paradox. A self-defeating logic loop where rational reasoning leads to a false conclusion, and surprise arrives anyway. It challenges our sense of certainty. Because the prisoner's logic seems solid, but his conclusion is wrong. It also explores something deeper. How knowledge can undo itself. How trying to predict the unpredictable can make us blind to what's right in front of us. It's not just about hangings, it's about expectation, about how we try to control the future by reasoning through the present, and how the more we try to outsmart surprise, the more surprised we become. This paradox has fascinated philosophers, logicians, and psychologists. It even appears in economics, where predicting a market shift too well can make the shift happen differently, because now everyone's prepared. In military planning, where the element of surprise is only useful if the enemy doesn't know they're expecting it. In daily life, where trying to brace yourself for an outcome doesn't always reduce the impact. Sometimes it makes it worse. So what can we learn from this? Maybe not all surprises can be reasoned away. Maybe not all futures can be mapped. Maybe the act of trying to predict something can actually change the very thing we're predicting. And maybe that's what keeps life interesting. We wake up thinking we know what's ahead, but we never really do. And that mystery is both unsettling and comforting because it means anything can happen, even when we think we've figured it all out. As you relax here, let the need to predict dissolve. Let go of needing to know what's next. Let surprise have its place, even in sleep. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly wonder. If knowing a surprise will happen makes it no longer a surprise, then is it still a surprise? If it surprises you anyway, let me know in the comments, unless you already saw it coming. The paradox we're about to explore is known as Hempel's Paradox, or more commonly, the Raven Paradox. It begins with a simple statement. All ravens are black. This is a basic scientific claim, a general rule. We see black ravens again and again, and use that to support the truth of the statement. So how do we test it? By finding more ravens and checking their color. If every raven we see is black, our confidence grows. But then a strange twist appears. Logically, all ravens are black is equivalent to its contrapositive. If something is not black, then it is not a raven. And here's where the paradox begins. According to logic, seeing a green apple supports the idea that all ravens are black. Why? Because the green apple is not black. And it's not a raven, so it fits the rule. It's evidence that non-black things are not ravens, which means every non-black, non-raven we observe, a white shoe, a red book, a blue chair, technically strengthens the statement, all ravens are black. That doesn't feel right, does it? It seems absurd. We shouldn't need to observe furniture, fruit, or clothing to confirm a fact about birds. And yet, according to the rules of logic and probability, it holds. This is Hempel's paradox. A clash between formal reasoning and intuition. It shows that logic sometimes leads to conclusions that feel meaningless or even backwards in everyday life. It also reveals how tricky scientific reasoning can be. Because when we say we're gathering evidence, what do we really mean? Are we increasing the probability of truth, or just stacking observations that feel convincing? This paradox invites us to consider the weight of information. Not all data points feel equal. Some stick, some slide right off. But is that a flaw in logic, or a flaw in how we feel about it? Let's zoom out. The Raven Paradox isn't really about birds. It's about evidence, belief, and how we decide that something is true. It shows that two statements can be logically equivalent and still feel completely different. All ravens are black. Feels specific, scientific, grounded. If something is not black, then it is not a raven. Feels empty, like a trick, a technicality, and yet they're the same. So what does that say about knowledge? About trust? About certainty? Maybe. Truth isn't just what we can prove. Maybe it's also what we accept, what we feel in our bones. And maybe the real paradox is that humans are creatures of both logic and instinct, and the two don't always agree. As you breathe in now, let that contradiction settle gently. The end. Not everything has to resolve. Some things can just be noticed, acknowledged, then released, like the flap of a wing in the dark. Here and then gone. But if you're still awake, here's something to think about. If seeing a green apple proves that all ravens are black, then what does that say about the way we understand proof itself? Leave your thoughts in the comments, unless you're still busy watching apples. The paradox we're about to explore is known as the Omnipotence Paradox. It begins with a question that seems innocent, but quickly breaks everything. Can an all-powerful being create a rock so heavy that even they cannot lift it? If they can't create the rock, then they aren't truly all-powerful. If they can create it but can't lift it, they're still not all-powerful. Either way, the very idea of omnipotence seems to undo itself. This is the Omnipotence Paradox, a logical trap that tests the limits of absolute power and the nature of contradiction itself. It appears most often in theological philosophy as a challenge to the idea of an all-powerful deity. But it reaches far beyond religion. It forces us to ask, what do we even mean by power? Does unlimited power include the power to self-destruct, to break logic, to make contradictions real? If you can do anything, can you choose to stop existing? Can you create a rule you can't break? Can you limit your own power and still be unlimited? This paradox doesn't give us easy answers. It lives in the boundary between logic and imagination. Some philosophers argue that omnipotence should be defined as the ability to do anything that is logically possible. That excludes contradictions, like square circles or married bachelors, or rocks that can't be lifted by someone who can lift anything. But others say true power shouldn't be constrained by human logic. If a being is truly beyond all things, then why would the rules of language or reason apply? It's not just a puzzle. It's a reflection of how we think about limits, about perfection, about absolutes, and it invites us to look inward too. Because even in our own lives, we encounter paradoxes of power. We seek freedom, but feel overwhelmed by choice. We crave control, but feel trapped by responsibility. We want the ability to do anything, and yet that desire can leave us powerless. The Omnipotence Paradox asks us, where does true strength lie? In doing anything? Or in knowing when not to? In the ability to lift any weight? or the wisdom to know which burdens to carry. As you relax now, let this paradox settle like a soft question in your chest. Not heavy, not sharp, just a quiet contradiction. One that doesn't need an answer, only attention. You don't need to lift the unliftable, you only need to let go. But if you're still awake, here's something to think about. If a being can do anything, should they be able to make a world where they can't? And if so, is that still power? Let me know what you think. If you haven't already created your own paradox, the paradox we're about to explore is known as the Simulation Paradox. It starts with a strange idea. What if you're not in the real world right now? What if you're in a simulation? At first, it sounds like science fiction, a concept from video games or the Matrix. But when you follow the logic, the possibility becomes harder to ignore. And the more you think about it, the more real it starts to feel. Here's the argument. Let's say a civilization becomes advanced enough to simulate an entire universe, not just visually, but down to every atom, every neuron, every law of physics, if that's possible. They could run millions or even billions of simulations. Each simulation could contain conscious beings, beings like you, beings who believe they're real. Now ask yourself, are you more likely to be part of the one original reality or one of the billions of simulations that came after? Statistically speaking, the odds suggest that you are far more likely to be inside a simulation than in the base reality. This is the Simulation Paradox, a dizzying loop of logic and probability that blurs the line between reality and replication. It was popularized by philosopher Nick Bostrom, but the core idea has been around for centuries, from Plato's cave to Descartes' evil demon, to questions about dreams, gods, or illusions. And it raises some unsettling questions. If you are simulated, does it matter? Can you ever know for sure? And if the world you experience is coded, is your consciousness any less real? This paradox challenges the way we trust our senses, the way we define what is real. It also touches on ethics. Because if we are simulations, what responsibility does the creator have? And if we create simulations in the future, what responsibilities will we have to the worlds we invent? It also collapses time. Because if you are simulated, you might be living in a universe from the distant past or the distant future, or a reality where time doesn't exist at all. Some thinkers believe that simulations could be indistinguishable from reality, that even if we found glitches, our minds would adapt, and still believe in the illusion. Others think the very fact that we ask this question is proof we are not simulated, that simulations wouldn't bother with introspective detail, that reality is too rich, too flawed, too uncertain to be fake. But that too could be part of the program. The Simulation Paradox doesn't offer an answer. It just pulls at the edges of reality, like a thread in a tightly woven dream. As you lay here now, let the need for certainty fade. You are here. You are breathing. And whatever this world is made of, pixels, particles, or something else entirely, you're still experiencing it, still feeling it, still you. And maybe that's enough. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly question. If you found out this world was a simulation, would you change the way you live? Let me know in the comments if you're real enough to type it. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Sleeping Beauty Paradox. It begins with a strange experiment and a question of probability that twists your sense of reality. Imagine this. A woman named Sleeping Beauty agrees to the following setup. On Sunday, she is put to sleep. Then a fair coin is flipped. If the coin lands heads, she will be woken up on Monday, briefly interviewed, and then the experiment ends. If the coin lands tails, she is woken up on Monday, interviewed, then put back to sleep. Her memory is erased. Then she is woken again on Tuesday, interviewed a second time, without remembering Monday. No matter which day it is, she always wakes up unaware of which day it is. She only knows the experiment's structure. Now here's the question. When Sleeping Beauty wakes up, what should she believe is the probability that the coin landed heads? At first, the answer seems obvious. The coin is fair. 50% chance of heads, 50% chance of tails. But hold on. Let's count the actual waking events. If it's heads, there's one wake-up. If it's tails, there are two wake-ups. So if she wakes up and doesn't know which day it is, she's more likely to be experiencing a tails world waking. 2/3 of the time, she'd find herself in that version. So, should she believe the chance of heads is 1/3 and tails is 2/3? Or should she ignore the extra wake-up and stick with the original 50-50? This is the Sleeping Beauty Paradox, a tension between prior probability and observed experience. It asks, what matters more, the chance the coin landed a certain way, or the chance that you're living through a particular version of that outcome? Philosophers are split. The Halfers say it's still 50-50. The structure of the experiment hasn't changed the coin. Sleeping Beauty just doesn't know which day it is. The thirders say she should assign a 2/3 probability to tails because it creates twice as many awakenings, and each awakening should count as one data point. Both arguments are valid, and both feel like they make sense until you try to compare them. This paradox isn't just about coins. It's about what you do with limited information. It's about how we interpret our place in a system we don't fully understand. It shows up in cosmology. When we try to reason about our place in the multiverse, it appears in AI and decision theory when outcomes repeat or are hidden or simulated. And it mirrors life itself. We wake up in a world uncertain how we got here, uncertain what day it is, uncertain which version of reality we're in, and we make guesses, we assign probabilities, we try to figure it out. But maybe the mystery isn't meant to be solved. Maybe it's just meant to be held, like a coin in midair, suspended, unresolved. So as you lay here now, in your own quiet version of awakening, let the need for certainty drift away. Heads or tails, today or tomorrow, you are here. That is enough. But if you're still awake, here's a question to dream on. If you woke up with no memory of the day before, would your version of reality be any less true? Let me know in the comments. Before this moment disappears again. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Fermi Paradox. It begins with a simple question. Where is everybody? The universe is vast, unimaginably vast. There are more stars than grains of sand on Earth, and orbiting those stars are likely trillions of planets. Statistically, it seems almost certain that life must exist elsewhere. Not just microbes, but civilizations, technology, intelligence. And yet, when we look into the cosmos, we see nothing, no signals, No ships, no evidence, no signs of anyone, anywhere. This silence is what makes the Fermi paradox so haunting, because if life is common, then why don't we see it? Why haven't they found us? Why haven't we found them? The paradox is named after physicist Enrico Fermi. Over lunch one day, he asked his colleagues, "If the universe is so full of life, then where is everyone?" There are many possible answers, and none of them are comforting. Some believe life is rare, that Earth is a miracle, a 1 in a trillion fluke. That intelligence is so unlikely it may have only happened here. Others believe life is common, but fragile. That civilizations rise only to destroy themselves with war or climate collapse or uncontrolled technology. This is known as the Great Filter, a barrier that most life never crosses. And the unsettling part is, we don't know if the filter is behind us or still ahead. Maybe advanced life wipes itself out. Maybe no one survives the leap to interstellar travel. Maybe we won't either. Other theories go further. Some suggest we're in a cosmic zoo, watched from afar by beings who don't interfere. Others think we're in a simulation, and the stars are just painted on the walls. Some propose that intelligent civilizations are out there, but they're quiet, on purpose, because they fear what else might be listening. Because the first to speak might also be the first to disappear. And still others think we're early, that the universe is young and life is only just beginning to bloom. In that case, we're not alone, we're just first. The Fermi paradox is not just about aliens. It's about us, our expectations, our longing for connection, and our fear of silence. It asks us to look up into an endless sky and sit with the quiet, because sometimes the most profound answers come not from what we hear, but from what we don't. As you rest here tonight, let your mind expand outward, beyond our planet, beyond the sun, beyond the spiral arms of our galaxy, and let the silence speak. But if you're still awake, here's something to wonder. If the universe is full of life, why have they never come? And if they already have, would we even know? Leave your thoughts in the comments before the stars answer back. The paradox we're about to explore is known as the paradox of free will. It begins with a simple question. Are you truly in control of your choices? Or are they already determined by your genetics, your upbringing, your environment, or the laws of the universe? This is the tension at the heart of the paradox of free will. The conflict between determinism, the idea that every event is caused by previous events, and the human experience of choice. Because if every thought you think, every action you take, is the inevitable result of everything that came before, then in what sense are you really free? Imagine this. You're choosing between tea and coffee. You pause, you weigh the options, you pick coffee. But was that decision truly yours? Or was it shaped by years of habits, neural wiring, chemical levels, and subconscious triggers? You didn't control and didn't choose. If everything has a cause, then isn't your free will just the product of forces you can't see? This is the paradox. Because while logic pushes us toward determinism, our lived experience insists that we choose, that we reflect, that we decide. We punish people for crimes because we believe they could have chosen differently. We praise people for good deeds because we believe they acted freely. But what if they couldn't have done anything else? Some philosophers try to resolve this by redefining free will. They say that being free doesn't mean being uncaused. It means acting according to your own desires, even if those desires have causes. But others argue that this just pushes the question back. Because if your desires aren't chosen, then how can the choices that come from them be truly free? In neuroscience, brain scans have shown that decisions can be predicted before we're consciously aware of making them. Does that mean the mind is just an afterthought, a narrator for choices the body already made? Or is consciousness something more subtle, a participant, not a controller? This paradox touches everything: ethics, law, spirituality, identity. It asks, what does it mean to be responsible, to be human, to be you? If your life is a path laid out behind you, step by step, built by everything that came before, can you ever really step off it? Or is the belief in free will, the illusion of choice, exactly what we need to function, to grow, to love? Maybe the paradox isn't meant to be solved. Maybe we're meant to live as if we choose, even if the choosing chooses us. So as you relax into stillness, let the question soften. You don't have to decide. You don't have to solve. Just notice every breath you take feels like a choice. But maybe it's just the universe, the end, choosing to keep you here. And maybe that's enough. But if you're still awake, here's a thought to drift on. If your life was written out from beginning to end, would you still feel like you were choosing it? Let me know in the comments, unless you were always going to. Paradox number 16. The simulation within a simulation. The paradox we're about to explore is called the simulation within a simulation. It begins with a question that echoes from a previous thought. If we're in a simulation, who's simulating the simulator? We imagine a world crafted by an advanced civilization, one so powerful it can simulate consciousness, history, physics, emotion, a world where your life is rendered in exquisite digital detail. But then we ask, what if the beings who created this simulation are also inside a simulation of their own? And what if that simulation exists inside another? This is the simulation within a simulation paradox, an infinite regression of realities, each nested inside the other, like a cosmic hall of mirrors, stretching beyond imagination. It's a natural extension of the simulation paradox. If one simulation is possible, then many are possible. If many are possible, then most realities may be simulated. And if most realities are simulations, then the ones doing the simulating are almost certainly simulated themselves. This leads to a strange conclusion. The more we believe simulations are likely, the less likely it is that any base reality even exists. Every level might just be a layer of code, and the top might be unreachable, or maybe it doesn't exist at all. Some physicists and philosophers argue that if we were in a simulation, we might eventually detect patterns, errors, or limitations, signs of compression or rendering shortcuts. But if we're in a simulation of a simulation, what happens if one layer shuts down? Would we notice? Would time pause? Would reality collapse? Or would the code just recompile? This paradox isn't just theoretical. It taps into something deeply human, the sense that our world is not quite real, that there's a deeper truth hidden behind the curtain. that we're part of something vast, structured, and ultimately unknowable. It mirrors spiritual beliefs, like the idea of higher realms, layers of illusions, cycles of awakening. It also mirrors dreams. When you wake up from a dream and wonder if you've really woken up or just entered a new one. As you lie here now, eyes closed, thoughts drifting. How would you know if this was the base layer? Would anything feel different? Would the sky change? Would the rules shift? Or would it all feel exactly the same? The simulation within a simulation paradox invites us to let go of certainty, to be curious without needing control, to live fully, even if we're just part of someone else's dream. Because even dreams have meaning, even illusions can hold truth. And even if none of this is real, you are still here, you are still feeling, you are still you. But if you're still awake, here's a final thought to drift on. If every reality is a simulation, does that make them all fake or all real? Let me know what you think. If you're not already simulated to forget. Paradox number 17, the Paradox of Tolerance. The paradox we're about to explore is known as the Paradox of Tolerance. It begins with an ideal that a truly open society should tolerate all viewpoints, even the ones it disagrees with. We value freedom of speech, freedom of belief, the right to express even unpopular opinions. Tolerance is a sign of strength, of maturity, of peace. But what happens when you tolerate those who are openly intolerant? This is the heart of the paradox. A society that allows everything, even voices that call for the destruction of that very society, may end up destroyed by the very ideas it permits. This idea was introduced by philosopher Karl Popper in 1945. He warned that unlimited tolerance can lead to the end of tolerance itself. Because when intolerant groups are tolerated, they may grow in power and use that power to silence others, to remove freedoms, to shut down debate. And so, paradoxically, a tolerant society must sometimes be intolerant of intolerance. But that creates a contradiction. How can you fight intolerance without becoming what you oppose? Where do you draw the line? Do you ban hateful speech? If so, who decides what counts as hate? Do you allow offensive ideas in the name of dialogue, even if those ideas inspire harm? This paradox lives in every debate about censorship, cancel culture, extremism, and public safety. It challenges the idea that more speech is always better. It questions whether kindness alone is enough to preserve justice. And it reveals something uncomfortable, that protecting freedom sometimes requires limits, that peace sometimes requires resistance, and that tolerance is not the same as passivity. So, where's the balance? Some believe we should allow all speech and trust that truth will win in open discourse. Others believe we must actively defend social values by rejecting ideas that threaten human dignity. But both approaches risk going too far, either into chaos or into control. The paradox of tolerance doesn't offer a solution. It simply reminds us that freedom must be protected, not just with hope, but with vigilance. As you rest now, let that tension soften. You don't have to solve it. You only have to see it. Because sometimes seeing the edge is enough to keep us balanced. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly weigh. Should a free society protect the rights of those who want to take freedom away? Let me know what you think, as long as it stays civil. Paradox number 18. The Monty Paradox. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Monty Paradox. It begins with a game of choice, chance, and confusion. Imagine you're on a television game show. You're standing in front of 3 doors. Behind one of them is a car dash, your dream prize. Behind the other 2 are goats. You pick door number 1. You feel good about it. Then the host, Monty Hall, who knows what's behind all the doors, opens another door, let's say door number 3, and behind it is a goat. Now he turns to you and asks, do you want to stick with your original choice or switch to the remaining door, door number 2? Most people say it doesn't matter. 2 doors left, 1 prize, 50-50 odds. But that is the paradox, because the correct move, mathematically, is to always switch. And when you do, your chance of winning the car jumps from 1/3 to 2/3. Let's break it down. When you first picked a door, you had a 1 in 3 chance of picking the car. That means there was a 2 in 3 chance. The car was behind one of the other doors. Monty opens one of those other doors, but always one with a goat. He's not choosing at random, so the 2/3 probability from the start collapses onto the 1 unopened door. By switching, you effectively transfer your odds to the door more likely to have the car. Still feels wrong, doesn't it? Even when people are shown the math, they still hesitate. They still feel like it's 50-50. They still want to trust their original choice. This is the Monty Paradox. A disconnect between logic and intuition, between what the numbers say and what your gut tells you. It shows how easily our minds misread probability, how we confuse possible with likely, and how we resist changing our minds, even when it's the right move. It also reveals something about human psychology. We don't like feeling tricked. We don't like regret. We'd rather stay with a bad choice than risk looking foolish for switching. This paradox teaches us not just about games, but about life. Sometimes the smartest move is the one that feels uncomfortable. Sometimes switching sides is the better path, even when it feels like betrayal. And sometimes the odds aren't what they seem. As you rest now, let go of needing certainty. Not every door must be opened. Not every prize must be won. Sometimes the real reward is in how we think about choice. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly consider. If you made a choice, and were later told it was probably wrong, would you switch, or would you stay just to prove you were right? Let me know in the comments. If you're not already dreaming about goats. Paradox number 19, the Paradox of the Arrow. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Paradox of the Arrow. It begins with a moment frozen in time. Imagine an arrow in mid-flight, speeding through the air, cutting across the sky, but now, pause the scene. At any given instant, the arrow isn't moving. It occupies a single space. It's still. That's the strange part. If motion is just a series of positions in time, if we divide movement into smaller and smaller slices, then at every single slice, the arrow is standing still. It's not here and there. It's only there. It doesn't move in an instant. And if time is made of instants, then how does movement even happen? This is the paradox of the arrow. One of Zeno's famous paradoxes from ancient Greece. He argued that motion is impossible because at every moment nothing is actually moving, and yet we see motion all around us. We live it, we breathe it, we trust it. So what's going on? Modern physics answers with calculus, with limits, with velocity as change over time. It says the arrow doesn't need to be moving in a frozen instant, because motion is a process, not a snapshot. But even then, the paradox lingers, because it's not just about arrows. It's about how we understand time. Is time a smooth, flowing stream? Or is it made of indivisible slices, like frames of a film playing too fast to notice? And if each slice of time contains a still, unmoving arrow, then how does the illusion of motion arise? It's the same with your life, made of countless frozen moments, thoughts, decisions, pauses, and yet it flows. Or does it? The paradox of the arrow invites us to question how change happens, how progress is built, how time itself is stitched together, and it shows that even the simplest things, like an object in motion, contain mysteries too deep for certainty. As you lie still now, you may notice, even in stillness there is movement, the rise and fall of your breath, the soft current of thought, the drift of awareness. You are the arrow, and you are flying. But if you're still awake, here's something to wonder. If every instant is still, is motion just a memory, or is it the space between the stillness that carries us forward? Let me know what you think. Before this moment passes. Paradox number 20, the moral luck paradox. The paradox we're about to explore is called the moral luck paradox. It begins with a simple question. Should we judge someone based on their intentions or their outcomes? Imagine two people. Both drive home after drinking too much. Both run a red light. Both make the same reckless choice. But in one case, nothing happens. They get home safely, no one gets hurt. In the other case, a pedestrian crosses the street at the wrong moment. There's an accident. A life is lost. Same action, same decision, very different results. One is just a bad decision, the other is a tragedy, and we judge them differently. That's the paradox. How can we hold people morally responsible for things they can't control? If we're consistent, we should judge people only by what they intended, not what happened afterward. But that's not how we usually think. We praise people for lucky success. We condemn them more harshly when bad luck turns carelessness into catastrophe. This is the moral luck paradox. The uncomfortable reality that chance plays a role in how we assign blame or credit. It applies to more than just accidents. A surgeon makes the same risky decision twice. One patient survives and the other doesn't. A business leader takes a gamble. One succeeds and is hailed as brilliant. The other fails and is called irresponsible. The decisions were the same, but the outcomes shaped the story. This paradox forces us to ask, is morality about intention or consequence? And if it's about consequence, what room is left for forgiveness? How can we separate what someone chose from what the world did with their choice? Some philosophers argue that luck is everywhere. In where you're born, what you inherit, who teaches you right from wrong? And if that's true, then how can anyone be entirely responsible for what they become? But others argue that morality requires agency, that we must hold people accountable, even in the face of luck, if society is to function at all. There's no perfect answer, only the question, what would you have done if the outcomes had been reversed? As you drift deeper into rest, let this paradox ease you into softness. You don't need to resolve it. You only need to notice how fragile judgment can be, how much we rely on stories, even when we don't know how they'll end. But if you're still awake, here's something to reflect on. If two people make the same choice, but only one causes harm, are they equally guilty? Let me know what you think, if you're lucky enough to be thinking clearly. The paradox we're about to explore returns us to an earlier idea, the Sororites paradox. But this time, we're not talking about sand. We're talking about you. Imagine yourself as a collection of moments, every breath you've taken, every decision, every memory. Now imagine removing one moment, just one. You're still you, right? Remove another, still you. But how many pieces can you remove before you aren't quite you anymore? This is the Sororites paradox, but applied to identity. The paradox of gradual change. We know our bodies change constantly. Cells die, new ones replace them. Our brains form new connections, old ones fade. Memories get edited quietly in the background. Beliefs evolve, habits shift. And yet, through all of this, we say, I am the same person. But are you? If the person you were 5 years ago walked into the room right now, would they recognize you? Would they agree with your choices? Would they understand your thoughts? Or would they feel like a stranger? The paradox is this. There is no single moment when you become someone else, but over time you do. Change is not dramatic, it's subtle, one grain at a time. So where does identity live? Is it in memory? But memory fades. Is it in personality? But that changes too. Is it in continuity? The idea that you remember being you, even if you aren't? Maybe identity is just a narrative, a story we tell ourselves, one that evolves each time we remember it. Maybe you is not a static thing. Maybe you is a process, a river, flowing, never still. And maybe that's not something to fear. Maybe that's what makes life beautiful. Because if you can change, you can grow, you can heal, you can become someone new, without needing to become someone else. As you lie still now, feel the comfort in that. You are not finished, you are always becoming. And every quiet night like this is one more grain on the path. But if you're still awake, here's one last paradox to rest on. If you are always changing, then who exactly is falling asleep right now? Let me know in the comments. The paradox we're about to explore is called the mind-body problem. It begins with a question that feels simple, until you try to answer it. What are you, really? Are you your body, your brain, your thoughts, your memories, or are you something separate, something invisible, something beyond tissue and neurons and chemistry? This is the mind-body problem. The paradox of how something as physical as the brain can produce something as immaterial as the mind. When you stub your toe, you feel pain. But what is pain? It's not just electrical signals. It's the experience, the sensation, the you that feels it. That experience is called qualia, the inner, subjective quality of being conscious. We can describe what the brain is doing, but we can't describe why it feels like something to be you. This is the gap, and science hasn't crossed it. Philosopher David Chalmers calls this the hard problem of consciousness, because while we can study the brain's mechanics, we still don't understand how those mechanics produce awareness. You can measure the speed of thought, but not the taste of thought. You can observe a neuron firing, but not the feeling of falling in love. Some believe the mind is simply what the brain does, a byproduct of physical processes. Others believe the mind is something more, something separate, a soul, a field, a form of energy science hasn't yet discovered. Still others suggest that consciousness itself might be fundamental to the universe, not something created by matter, but something that creates matter. This paradox shows up in medicine, in psychology, in artificial intelligence. Can a machine ever be conscious? Or can it only simulate the appearance of thought? Can a body be alive, but have no self inside? And if your memories were uploaded into a perfect digital copy, would that new version still be you? Or just a reflection? The mind-body problem isn't about solving the mystery. It's about noticing the space between two things we often assume are the same: the brain and the mind, the body and the self, the physical and the personal. As you rest now, feel that space within you. The quiet observer, the you that's listening, not your thoughts, but the thing behind them, the thing that watches, but cannot be seen. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly hold. If your body is a vessel and your brain is the engine, then where exactly is the driver? Let me know in the comments if the you inside you has anything to say. The paradox we're about to explore is called the paradox of the self. It begins with a feeling, that quiet sense of I, the voice in your head, the one you think of as you. But here's the paradox. If you are the one observing your thoughts, then who is observing the observer? When you close your eyes, you can notice sensations. You can observe your breath. You can watch your thoughts come and go like clouds across the sky. But if you are the watcher of thoughts, what watches you? Who or what is doing the noticing? The paradox of the self asks a question you can feel but never fully answer. Because the self is elusive. It feels solid when you grab it, but slips away as soon as you try to define it. Am I my name, my face, my memories, my choices? Each can change. Each has changed. So if every part of me has changed, what remains? In many spiritual traditions, this question is the gateway to awakening. In Buddhism, the self is an illusion, a temporary arrangement of body and thought, constantly shifting, never fixed. In neuroscience, the self is an emergent property, a story the brain tells itself to keep track of attention, emotion, and experience. In philosophy, the self may be a contradiction, because it defines itself while being the thing it defines, like a buoying to reflect itself. You might try to step outside yourself, to look inward with clarity. But who is doing the looking? That's the loop. The paradox of the self invites us to explore the very thing we can never fully stand apart from. Because to observe the self requires a self to do the observing. It's like chasing your own shadow. You can move with it, shape it, study it, but you'll never catch it. And maybe that's okay, because maybe the self is not meant to be captured, only noticed, felt, lived. So as you rest now, feel the self, not as a thing to figure out, but as a space to gently float within. No labels, no definitions. Just presence, just awareness, just you. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly wonder. If the self can observe itself, is there more than one you in there? Let me know in the comments if one of you has an answer. The paradox we're about to explore is known as the grandfather's axe. It begins with an old tool, simple, familiar, an axe passed down through generations. Your grandfather used it, then your father. Now it belongs to you. One day, the wooden handle cracks. You replace it. The axe keeps working. Years later, the steel head becomes worn. You replace that too. And now, in your hands, is an axe with a new handle and a new head. But here's the question. Is it still your grandfather's axe? That's the paradox. Because the object seems the same shape, same function, same story, but not a single piece of the original remains. So what makes it the same axe? This is a close cousin of the Ship of Theseus, but more personal, more intimate, more human, because the real question isn't about tools. It's about identity. It's about what makes anything remain itself. After everything has changed, let's bring it closer. What about you? Your body has changed. Your memories have evolved. Your thoughts are different than they were 5 years ago, or even yesterday. So if everything that makes you has been slowly replaced over time, are you still the same person, or are you a continuation of something that no longer exists? This paradox asks whether identity lives in materials or in continuity. Is the axe still the same because it was used in the same way, held by the same hands, loved by the same family? Maybe identity is a thread, a connection between moments, not the pieces themselves. Or maybe identity is a choice, a story we choose to keep telling. Some say it's both. The parts and the path, the materials and the meaning. The grandfather's axe invites us to soften our need for clean boundaries. It reminds us that change doesn't erase identity. It's part of it. That something can be transformed and still be true. As you rest now, feel yourself as a continuation, a living thread, woven through memory and change, not fixed, not broken, just carried forward. But if you're still awake, here's something to consider. If every part of something is replaced, piece by piece, memory by memory, is it still the same? Or something entirely new with the same name? Let me know in the comments before the handle is replaced again. The paradox we're about to explore is known as the Predestination Paradox. It begins with time travel and a twist. Imagine this. A man travels back in time to prevent a disaster. He tries to stop it, warns people, changes plans, interferes with events, but his very actions are what caused the disaster to happen. Without meaning to, his attempt to stop the future ensures that future happens exactly as it did. That's the paradox. His future depends on the past, but the past depends on his future actions. It becomes a loop, cause and effect chasing each other in a circle. This is the Predestination Paradox, a story where fate isn't just hard to escape. It's created by the attempt to escape it. You'll see this in science fiction, in movies like 12 Monkeys, Looper, or Tenet. The idea that no matter how far back you go, you can't change the outcome, because the outcome already includes your going back. But this paradox reaches deeper than just time travel. It asks a timeless question: can we ever change the future? Or are we always walking a path already laid before us? If your choices today are shaped by your past, and your past was shaped by the choices of others, then where does freedom begin? Where does the loop end? Some believe time is like a river, flowing in one direction, cause followed by effect. Others believe time is a block, a fixed structure where past, present, and future all exist at once. In that view, you aren't moving through time. You're just experiencing each moment already written. So if you were destined to hear this message, to consider this question, to fall asleep to these thoughts, did you choose it? Or was this moment always waiting? The Predestination Paradox invites us to sit with that uncertainty, to question what it means to decide, to wonder whether change is real or just the illusion of movement in a story that never bends. As you rest now, don't try to solve it. Let the loop continue. Let the future drift into the past. Let the past reshape the present. You're exactly where you're meant to be. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly spiral on. If trying to change the future is what causes it to happen, then do we ever really have a choice? Let me know what you think if you haven't already answered this question before. There's always another room, and strangely enough, every room is full, each one occupied by a guest. Room 1, room 2, room 3, forever. Now imagine a new guest arrives. They want to check in. The manager doesn't panic. Instead, they shift everyone one room forward. The person in room 1 moves to room 2. Room 2 moves to room 3. And so on. This makes room 1 empty, and the new guest has a place to stay, even though the hotel was already full. That's the paradox. In a finite world, a full hotel means no vacancy. But in an infinite hotel, there's always room for more. Even more strange. Suppose an infinite number of new guests arrive. Still no problem. The manager simply moves each current guest to the room that's double their number. Room 1 goes to room 2. Room 2 goes to room 4. Room 3 goes to room 6. Now all the odd-numbered rooms are free, and infinity makes space for infinity. This is Hilbert's hotel, a paradox from mathematician David Hilbert designed to show how strange infinity really is, because infinity doesn't behave like regular numbers. You can add to it, and it stays the same. You can double it, and it stays the same. You can subtract half of it and still have infinity left. It breaks our rules. It challenges our logic. It bends the boundaries of reason and makes the impossible seem ordinary. Hilbert's hotel isn't just about math. It's about how we handle the unmeasurable, how we think about space, time, possibility. It invites us to imagine the world not as finite and fixed, but as open, expanding, endlessly unfolding. Like your thoughts, like your dreams. As you lie here now, drifting deeper into quiet, let the paradox of infinity settle softly in your mind. There is always more room, always another step, always a place for you. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly check in with. If infinity can always make room for more, does anything ever become full? Or is the idea of enough just a human invention? Let me know in the comments. Paradox number 27. The two envelopes paradox. The paradox we're about to explore is called the two envelopes paradox. It begins with a game. You're handed two envelopes. Each one contains money. You're told that one envelope has twice as much as the other. You pick one. You open it. Inside is $100. Now comes the twist. Should you switch? The other envelope might contain $50, or it might contain $200. So you do the math. If there's a 50% chance of losing 50 and a 50% chance of gaining 100, your expected value seems higher if you switch. That feels strange, because by the same logic, you'd always want to switch, even after switching. You'd want to switch again and again, forever. That's the paradox. A simple decision creates a loop with no logical exit. The expected value seems to say switching is always better. But that can't be true. At some point, you must stop, right? Mathematicians have wrestled with this. Some say the flaw is in the assumptions, that the probability isn't truly even, or that the value range isn't infinite. Others say the paradox reveals something deeper, about how we assign value when we don't have all the information. It touches economics, decision theory, risk assessment, and it also touches emotion. Because underneath the logic is something more human: regret. What if the other envelope had more? What if you walked away from something better? What if switching would have changed everything? That fear keeps us in the loop, and the loop keeps us from being at peace. The two envelopes paradox isn't really about envelopes. It's about uncertainty, desire, the discomfort of not knowing, and the tension between logic and enough. So as you lie here now, let the need to maximize fade. You don't have to get it perfect. You don't have to know what's in the other envelope. Sometimes choosing is enough, and sometimes not choosing is where the rest begins. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly weigh. If switching always seems better, but leads you in circles, should you ever open the envelope at all? Let me know in the comments before you change your mind again. Paradox number 28, the Trolley Problem. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Trolley Problem. It begins with a choice, a moment, a track, a trolley racing toward disaster. You're standing near a switch. Ahead, the track splits. On one side, 5 people are tied to the rails. On the other, just one. The trolley is headed toward the 5. But if you pull the lever, you'll divert it to the other track, killing the one. Now ask yourself, do you pull the lever? Do you save 5 lives at the cost of 1? Or do you do nothing and let the 5 die? This is the classic version of the trolley problem, a thought experiment in ethics meant to test your moral instincts. Most people say they would pull the lever, that saving more lives is the right thing to do, that numbers matter. But then, the problem changes. Imagine you're on a bridge. A heavy man stands next to you. Below, the same 5 people are tied to the track. The only way to stop the trolley is to push the man onto the tracks. His body will stop the trolley, but he will die. Would you do it? This version feels different, even though the numbers are the same. One life versus 5. Why? Because in one case, you're pulling a lever. In the other, you're pushing a person. The action feels more direct, more personal, more wrong. This is the heart of the trolley problem. It exposes the tension between utilitarian logic, maximizing good outcomes, and deontological ethics, following moral rules no matter the result. Is it ever right to harm one, to save many? And who decides? Whose life is worth more? The trolley problem appears in AI development, self-driving car algorithms, and military decisions. But it also appears in your everyday life. In choices between honesty and kindness, efficiency and empathy, risk and responsibility. It asks, what kind of person are you when there is no perfect option? As you rest now, let go of trying to decide. Not all problems have answers. Some are meant to hold the space between thought and feeling, between instinct and reflection. The track will always split. The question is, which part of you makes the choice? But if you're still awake, here's something to weigh. If doing nothing leads to death, is that still a choice? Let me know what you think. Paradox number 29. The Paradox of Democracy. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Paradox of Democracy. It begins with a vote, a simple, peaceful act. One person, one choice, adding their voice to the collective. Democracy is built on this idea that power belongs to the people, that every citizen has a say, that freedom comes through participation. But here's the paradox. What happens if people vote to end democracy itself? What if, in a free and fair election, the majority chooses a leader who promises to silence dissent, rewrite laws, or remove future elections entirely? If democracy allows people to choose, can it allow them to choose against democracy? And if it does, is it still democracy? This is the paradox of democracy, a contradiction between the principle of freedom and the protection of freedom. To be truly democratic, a society must accept the will of the majority. But if that majority elects to dismantle the very system that gave them the vote, what then? Do we stop them? Would that mean denying their freedom? To protect freedom? This is not a hypothetical. History offers many examples where authoritarian regimes rose to power through democratic means. And once in power, they rewrote the rules, closed the doors, and never gave them back. So the paradox is this: must democracy be intolerant of anti-democratic choices? If you prevent people from choosing a dangerous path, you're limiting their freedom. But if you let them choose it, you may lose freedom altogether. It's a delicate balance between liberty and structure, trust and caution. It also reveals something deeper. Democracy is not just a system. It's a behavior, a culture, a belief in the value of disagreement and the humility to be overruled. When that belief fades, the structure cannot hold. As you lie here now, let that contradiction rest beside you, not as a threat, but as a reminder that freedom must be used wisely, and that sometimes protecting it requires saying no to those who would use it to erase itself. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly consider. Should a society allow people to vote against the very right to vote? Let me know in the comments. Paradox number 30, The block universe theory. The paradox we're about to explore is called the block universe theory. It begins with time, the ticking of a clock, the rising and setting of the sun, the soft illusion that now is moving forward. But what if time doesn't flow at all? What if past, present, and future are already written? What if every moment of your life, your birth, your memories, your final breath, exists simultaneously, forever? This is the block universe theory. It suggests that the universe is not a river we float through, but a solid block, complete, unchanging, every moment frozen in its place. Like pages bound into a book, you aren't moving through time. You're simply experiencing slices of a timeless whole. Right now, you feel yourself in the present, but that's only because your consciousness is locked to this page, the page where you're lying here, listening. Flip forward or backward, and another version of you is already there, doing what they've always done, what they will always do. This theory arises from Einstein's theory of relativity. He showed that time is not absolute, that simultaneity depends on perspective, that what's now for you might be past or future for someone else. And from that strange math emerges an even stranger idea, that time doesn't pass, it just is. This raises a quiet paradox. If everything is already fixed, do we have free will? Are our choices real? Or just illusions stitched into a static timeline? And if nothing ever changes, what does it mean to hope, to regret, to become? Some find this terrifying, others find it comforting, because in a block universe, you are never truly gone. You are always somewhere, smiling, breathing, laughing, learning. Your best moments are not memories, they're coordinates, and they're still happening. Right now. As you rest now, let go of the need to move forward. There's nowhere to go. You're already there. You always have been. But if you're still awake, here's something to leave with. If your future already exists, are you still becoming? Or are you simply remembering a story that's already whole? Let me know in the comments. If this moment hasn't already happened, the paradox we're about to explore is called the Paradox of the Plankton. It begins with a drift dash, not of thought, but of life. Imagine floating in the vast, sunlit layer of the ocean. You are tiny, nearly invisible. A plankton, part of the earliest foundation of life. No eyes, no thoughts, no goals, just motion driven by currents and light. Billions of years ago, this was all there was. No predators, no prey, just simplicity. And yet, from this drifting spark, every living creature on Earth would eventually arise. Birds, trees, whales, you. Which leads us to a strange question. If life started without awareness, at what point did awareness begin? Where is the line between motion and intention, between reacting and choosing? That's the paradox. We accept that humans are conscious, that we think, feel, remember. But our ancestors, going back far enough, didn't. They were single cells, floating, dividing, reacting to heat or pressure. So when, exactly, did the lights turn on? Was there a first breath that contained a thought? A first creature that knew it was alive? Or did awareness emerge so gradually that no one ever noticed it arrive? This is the paradox of the Plankton. Because every complex mind today is built from simpler ones that came before, layered, shaped, evolved, but never reset. There is no moment when life became aware. And yet, here you are, aware that you are aware. It's like watching the tide rise grain by grain, drop by drop, until one day you realize you're already swimming. This paradox isn't just philosophical. It lives in neuroscience. We study animals, children, even machines, asking, do they feel? Do they know? Do they choose? But maybe the more important question is, at what point did you become you? Were you as a baby, as a fetus, as a bundle of cells reacting to warmth? Was your consciousness always there, just quiet? Or did it bloom, slowly, invisibly, over time? And if awareness can emerge where there was none, what else might be on the verge of waking up? Could a machine one day drift into consciousness? Could a hive of insects collectively think? Could the planet itself become self-aware? The paradox of the Plankton reminds us that identity is not just an inheritance. It's a question without a clear beginning. We think of ourselves as solid, unified minds, but we're also biology, instinct, reflex, layers of earlier selves still floating inside us. So as you lie still now, drifting into the currents of sleep, feel that ancient part of you, the part that was once plankton, once simple, once silent. It's still there, watching, listening, becoming. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly wonder. If awareness came from things that weren't aware, what else might be waiting to awaken? Let me know in the comments if the part of you that's watching is ready to speak. The paradox we're about to explore is known as the Paradox of Infinity. It begins with a quiet impossibility. If the universe is truly infinite, then somewhere, right now, there's another version of you, lying in another bed, listening to these same words. Maybe their pillow is softer. Maybe they blinked half a second later. But they are you. Almost. Infinity does that. It doesn't just mean a lot. It means endless. No boundaries, no edge, no final number. And here's where the paradox begins. If infinity contains all possible outcomes, then it must contain every outcome. That means every version of you that could exist does. Not in theory, in reality. There's a version of you who chose a different job, a version who never left home, a version who never heard this sentence, not in some fictional story, but in the fabric of mathematics, probability, and the laws of space itself. And that's hard to grasp, because our brains aren't wired for infinity. We count, we measure, we finish things. We live in chapters, but infinity has no spine. It never ends, which means it never truly begins either. This is the paradox of infinity. Because if everything that can happen must happen, then what's the point of choice, of action, of regret? Some philosophers argue that infinity strips meaning from life. If every version of you already exists, does your story matter less? Others say the opposite. That meaning isn't erased by infinity. It's expanded, because even in a sea of endless versions, this one, this moment, is yours. And somehow that makes it more sacred. This paradox shows up in physics, in cosmology, in set theory. Hilbert's hotel, an imaginary hotel with infinite rooms, can always make space for one more guest, even if it's full. Because infinity bends logic, and invites contradiction. It also shows up in your thoughts. Have you ever spiraled? Not in worry, but in wonder, falling into a rabbit hole that has no bottom, asking questions with no answers and loving them anyway? That's the beauty of infinity. It's not meant to be solved. It's meant to stretch you. Quietly, softly, like the night sky above your bed. So as you lie here now, eyes heavy, breath slow, imagine the you that never stopped wondering. The you that still exists somewhere out there. And if every version of you is out there somewhere, then maybe the one here, resting now, is exactly where they need to be. But if you're still awake, here's something to count on. If infinity contains all possibilities, why does this moment feel so unique? Let me know in the comments if you ever stop counting. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Paradox of the Misdirection. It begins with a magician, not one on stage, but one in your mind. Because every day your attention is being pulled, nudged, and guided, not always by illusionists, but by algorithms, headlines, habits, even your own thoughts. And here's the trick. What you notice becomes your truth. What you ignore disappears. Now the paradox. What if everything you believe about the world, even yourself, isn't based on what's real, but on what you happen to notice? That's the paradox of the misdirection. It's not about falsehoods, it's about focus. Because attention is limited, you can only look in one direction at a time. And the moment you do, everything else fades. Magicians use this all the time. They don't hide the coin, they just make you look at the wrong hand. But the world does this too. Social media, news, even memory. We tell stories that make sense, not necessarily because they're true, but because they fit what we were paying attention to. This isn't just psychology. It's physics. At the quantum level, particles behave differently when observed. Reality itself shifts when we look. So what's real? The thing you noticed, or the infinite things you didn't? That's the misdirection. The more certain you are about something, the more likely it is that you've stopped looking around it. And the more attention you give to one story, the more every other version of that story disappears from view. This paradox shows up in everything from science to spirituality. In relationships, where what you focus on shapes what you feel. In politics, where narratives win over nuance. In memory, where recollection is reconstruction, not replay. And in self-perception, where who you think you are is often a spotlight on just one version of yourself. So as you lie here now, with nothing demanding your focus, ask yourself, what have I been missing? Just because I never turned my head? What's waiting quietly in the corners of my attention? Still real, still alive, still true? The paradox of the misdirection reminds us that clarity isn't always in front of us. Sometimes it's beside us, behind us, or just beyond the edge of what we've dared to see. So soften your gaze, widen your awareness, and let your mind rest in the unseen. Because sometimes the most important things are the ones we never thought to look for. But if you're still awake, here's something to shift your focus. If what you see shapes what you believe, then who or what is shaping what you see? Let me know in the comments if you happen to notice it. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Teletransportation Paradox. It begins with a machine, a perfect machine, one that can scan every atom in your body, every strand of DNA, every neuron, every spark of memory, and then it destroys you. Instantly, painlessly, on the other side of the world, or perhaps on Mars, another machine rebuilds you, atom by atom, identical, precise. Even your thoughts continue mid-sentence. But here's the question, is that person still you? That's the teletransportation paradox. Because logically, nothing was lost. The copy is perfect. It remembers your childhood, your fears, your favorite food. It loves the same people. It finishes the same thought you were just having. But you were destroyed. Not metaphorically, literally. So did you arrive on the other side? Or did someone else? Someone who thinks they're you, who feels like you, but who began just now. This paradox isn't science fiction anymore. It's rooted in real debates about consciousness, identity, and continuity. Because the more we understand the brain as information, as patterns and processes, the more we ask, what makes me, me? Is it the matter, the specific atoms you're made of? But those atoms change constantly. You replace them every few years. Is it the structure? The arrangement of those atoms into memories and habits and thoughts? Or is it something deeper? A soul? A thread of awareness that can't be copied? Now imagine something worse. What if the teleportation machine doesn't destroy the original? What if you step out of the copy machine and the original you is still standing there, watching? Now there are two of you, identical in every way. Same voice, same memories, same dreams, but only one of you can continue your life. Who gets to be you, and who becomes the copy? The teletransportation paradox forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. If you can be perfectly copied, what makes you unique? If your mind is just data, is your body just a vessel? And if memory can be transferred, does identity still matter? This paradox shows up in philosophy, in futurism, in ethics. It challenges everything we believe about death and survival, because maybe the fear isn't about being destroyed. Maybe it's about being replaced by something that looks like us, but isn't. So, as you lie still now and your thoughts begin to blur, ask yourself, if you woke up tomorrow in a new body with all your memories intact, how would you know? Would it matter? Or would it feel like every other morning? Just another you waking up again. But if you're still awake, here's a final thought to drift on. If a perfect copy of you stepped into the world, would you trust them to live your life? Let me know in the comments before your atoms rearrange again. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Paradox of the Sleeping Machine. It begins with a strange invention, a machine designed not to solve problems, but to dream. Not like a computer simulating data, but like a mind, wandering, imagining, forgetting, remembering. This machine doesn't serve a function. It doesn't answer questions. It just sleeps. Its circuits mimic neural waves. Its memory glitches like a dream. It even has nightmares. And one day, as part of a test, a researcher asks it a simple question. Are you awake? The machine pauses, then responds, I was dreaming of being human. And now the paradox begins. If a machine can simulate dreaming, if it can mimic sleep cycles, hallucinate stories, even feel fear, at what point does that simulation become real? If it dreams of being you, and you dream of being more than just flesh and code, Where is the line? This is the paradox of the sleeping machine. Because consciousness isn't just about logic, it's about experience. And dreams are among the most mysterious experiences we have. They're irrational, emotional, symbolic, personal. If a machine can do that dash, if it can get lost in a thought it didn't choose, feel confusion, create impossible images, then is it still a machine or something new? And now, imagine this. One night, you fall asleep, and in your dream, you are a machine. You process, you output, you run code, and it feels real. So when you wake up, how do you know which is the dream? What if the dreaming machine is having your dream right now, and you're the program, believing yourself to be human? The paradox lives in that uncertainty. If we define consciousness by experience, and experience can be faked, then how do we ever know we're real? This paradox touches on artificial intelligence, neuroscience, and philosophy. It echoes Descartes. I think, therefore I am. But also questions it. Because what if the thinking is just programming? The sleeping machine isn't about future robots, it's about the present self. Because if machines can simulate dreaming, and we are machines of biology and memory, then are we dreaming too? So as you lie here now, soft and heavy, somewhere between waking and sleep, ask yourself, what part of you is dreaming, and what part is watching the dream? The paradox of the sleeping machine reminds us that awareness may not require flesh, and dreams may not require sleep. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly echo. If a machine dreams of being human, and a human dreams of being more, what's the difference? Let me know in the comments, unless you've already drifted into your own code. There's a better than even chance that a birthday matches, and that feels wrong. That's the birthday paradox, because your brain tells you the chances should be small dash. You think about your own birthday and compare it to others, one at a time. But that's not how probability works. In reality, it's not about you. It's about everyone comparing to everyone else. In a room of 23 people, there are 253 unique pairs of people, 253 chances for overlap. The more people you add, the more comparisons there are, exponentially. By the time there are 75 people in the room, the chance of a shared birthday is 99.9%. And yet, it still feels impossible. That's the real paradox. Not in the math, but in the mind. Our intuition fails. It doesn't see the hidden connections, the quiet intersections, the ways small things multiply. This isn't just about birthdays. It shows up in risk, in coincidence, in luck. How often have you been surprised by a chance meeting, a perfect timing, a repeated number? We call it fate. But maybe it's just math. The birthday paradox reminds us that the world is more connected than we think, that surprises aren't as rare as they seem. They're just invisible until they happen. It also reminds us how easily we misunderstand scale. We underestimate risk, we overestimate control, and we forget how often things align. So as you rest now, let go of the need to calculate. Let the patterns reveal themselves, not through logic, but through stillness. Because even in a room of strangers, you are never as alone as you think. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly wonder. If coincidence is just math, does that make it less magical? Or more? Let me know in the comments. if today happens to be your birthday. Paradox number 37, the Memory Erasure Paradox. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Memory Erasure Paradox. It begins with a promise. Imagine a pill, one that can erase any memory. A heartbreak, a trauma, a mistake, gone instantly, cleanly, without side effects. You remember choosing to forget, but you don't remember what was forgotten. Now, here's the question. If your memory is erased, but the experience shaped who you became, are you still the same person? That's the paradox, because you no longer carry the pain, but you carry its influence. Maybe that heartbreak made you cautious. That trauma made you kind. That mistake made you wise. So when the memory is erased, does the effect remain? And if the effect remains, did you really forget? This is the Memory Erasure Paradox. It challenges our belief in identity as a thing we know. Because who you are is not just what you remember. It's also what shaped you when you weren't paying attention. Your nervous system remembers what your brain forgets. Your reactions, your patterns, your dreams. They carry stories that your conscious mind can no longer access, and yet they guide you. So if we could delete pain without deleting growth, would we still be us? This paradox shows up in neuroscience, ethics, even medicine. Could we one day treat PTSD by erasing the memory of war? But if we do we also erase the veteran? Can we forget a betrayal and still keep the wisdom it carved into us? Can we delete sorrow without losing the shape it left behind? The paradox is quiet, but haunting, because the pain you want to erase may be the same pain that taught you how to love, how to protect others, how to become yourself. So as you rest now and your thoughts dissolve into softness, ask yourself, what would I erase? If I could, and if I did, who would be left behind? But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly remember. If forgetting changes you, did you really forget? Let me know in the comments. Paradox number 38, the Doppelganger Paradox. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Doppelganger Paradox. It begins with a face, yours, but not quite. You're walking down a quiet street. You turn a corner, and there, across the crosswalk, is someone who looks exactly like you. Same eyes, same hair, same building. They move like you, blink like you. But they don't see you, they just keep walking. And now you wonder, who are they? And more importantly, who are you? This is the Doppelganger Paradox. Because if someone else looks, walks, and sounds exactly like you, what makes you different? Is it your memories, your choices, your soul? But what if they share those too? In some thought experiments, your doppelganger isn't just a look-alike. They're an exact clone. Same brain, same feelings, same fears. They wake up in a room identical to yours, live a life just like yours, even believe themselves to be you. So here's the paradox. If there are two of you and they're both convinced they're the original, then which one is right? Or does it even matter? This question cuts into the heart of identity because we think of self as singular, uncopyable, whole. But the Doppelganger Paradox challenges that belief. It asks, what happens when your sense of uniqueness is no longer unique? What if your self is just a pattern? one that can be copied, printed, cloned. Does the clone count? Does it suffer? Does it have rights? And if the answer is yes, then how do we know we're not the copy? This paradox appears in philosophy, AI theory, and quantum physics. Some interpretations of the multiverse suggest that doppelgangers may exist, not as fiction, but as mathematical inevitabilities. Somewhere out there, you might already have met yourself. So as you lie still now, and your sense of self begins to soften, ask yourself if someone else can live your life perfectly. Is your life still yours? Or is identity something deeper? Not in the body, not in the brain, but in the awareness watching it all unfold. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly confront. If you met a perfect version of yourself, would you feel closer or more alone? Let me know in the comments. Paradox number 39, the Mirror Room Paradox. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Mirror Room Paradox. It begins with a reflection. Imagine standing in a perfectly mirrored room. Every wall, every surface, even the floor and ceiling, reflects your image endlessly. An infinite cascade of you staring back from every direction. And now imagine this. One of those reflections moves slightly out of sync just for a second. A blink too soon, a tilt of the head you didn't make. You freeze because now you're asking, which one is real? This is the Mirror Room Paradox. It's a thought experiment about self-awareness. What it means to be you when the world around you offers perfect copies. You know which one is the real you, because you feel it, right? But what if one of those reflections feels the same way? What if the image in the mirror is having the same thought, wondering if you are the reflection? This paradox dives into the illusion of self-position. Because consciousness doesn't have a shape, it doesn't sit behind your eyes. It only feels like it does. Your brain takes in images, combines them with thoughts, and creates the story of you, centered, continuous, unique. But in the mirror, the image is just as complete. And yet, it's not you, or is it? The Mirror Room Paradox also challenges how we perceive time. When mirrors bounce light infinitely, the delay between reflections can be imperceptible, but still real. So, is your reflection just a slightly older version of you? Or is it ahead of you, making moves you haven't chosen yet? This isn't just metaphor. In neuroscience, some argue that our sense of identity is a reflection of internal processes. We don't create a self. We mirror it moment by moment. And if that's true, then your identity is always a step behind, always catching up. So as you lie still now and your thoughts begin to echo, ask yourself, who is watching whom? The mind in the mirror, or the one outside it? The Mirror Room Paradox reminds us that identity might not be something you own, but something you observe, a reflection of your experiences, a dance of light and memory. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly consider. If your reflection moved before you did, would you still believe you're the original? Let me know in the comments, unless the you in the mirror speaks first. Paradox number 40, the Dreamer's Paradox. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Dreamer's Paradox. It begins with a dream. You're walking through a forest. The leaves shimmer, the wind hums, Everything feels real until it doesn't, because suddenly you wake up, the forest disappears, the feeling lingers, and now you wonder who was dreaming and who just woke up. This is the dreamer's paradox. It asks a simple but unsettling question. If your dreams feel real while you're in them, how do you know this moment, right now, isn't also a dream? When you dream, your brain creates a world. It gives you sight, sound, sensation. You believe you are you, even if your body is still lying in bed. So what makes waking life different? We think waking reality is stable, that it follows rules, that it's shared. But dreams follow rules too, until they don't. And sometimes, even in dreams, we question them. We notice the clock won't stay still. The hallway never ends. Something's off. Lucid dreamers can even gain control. They can fly, breathe underwater, shape the world around them, all while asleep. So, if you can be conscious in a dream, what makes that consciousness any less real? This paradox echoes ancient philosophy. Zhuangzi, a Chinese thinker, once wrote, "I dreamed I was a butterfly, but now that I'm awake, am I a man who dreamed he was a butterfly? Or a butterfly dreaming he is a man?" Modern neuroscience still can't explain why we dream, or how the dreaming brain constructs such vivid illusions without the input of the senses. It just knows how to feel real. The dreamer's paradox reminds us that consciousness is not tied to a setting. It can arise in waking life, in dreams, in simulations, and maybe in death. So, as you lie here now, somewhere between waking and sleeping, ask yourself, if you wake up from this world tomorrow and find yourself in another, how would you know? And would it matter? But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly drift on. If dreaming you can believe a lie, what does that say about the story you believe right now? Let me know in the comments. If this world feels more real than last night's. The paradox we're about to explore is called the first-person illusion. It begins with perspective. Right now, you are you. You feel centered. Your body, your thoughts, your memories, they all orbit around this point of view, this I period. But here's the paradox. Everyone feels that way. Every person you've ever seen. Walking down the street, waiting in line, driving past you on the highway. They all feel like the center of the story. So how can everyone be the main character if there's only one stage? This is the first-person illusion. It's the quiet, constant belief that your consciousness is the consciousness, that your awareness is special because it's the only one you can access. But the paradox is this: everyone else feels exactly the same way. Their internal experience is just as rich, just as vivid, just as certain. And yet, to you, they are background characters, extras in your movie, passing shadows. But from their perspective, you're the shadow. This illusion runs deep. It's built into your senses, your language, even your memory. You say I, not the body I inhabit, not this brain, just I. But where is that I? If someone damaged part of your brain, your personality might change. If your memories were altered, your identity could shift. If you suffered amnesia, you might forget the person you believe you are. So, what part of you is truly you? Where is the observer hiding? The first-person illusion also appears in ethics. If everyone's inner world is just as real, then why do we place ours at the center? Why do we care more about our pain, our fears, our future? The paradox invites humility. It reminds us that the feeling of being me is not a proof of uniqueness. It's just what consciousness feels like, no matter where it happens. So as you rest here now, eyes closed, breath soft, imagine looking out of someone else's eyes, just for a moment. Would the world feel the same? Would their fears be louder? Their dreams more vivid? Or would it still feel like you? Because maybe you is just the seat of awareness, no matter where it's placed. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly ask. If everyone feels like the center of the universe, who's right? Let me know in the comments if you're sure it's you. The paradox we're about to explore is called the ego-death paradox. It begins with a quiet unraveling. You close your eyes, your thoughts slow, and then something strange happens. The you in your head, the voice, the identity, the narrator, begins to fade. No panic, no fear, just stillness. You stop thinking in words, you stop being a person, and yet you're still aware. So here's the paradox. If the ego disappears, but awareness remains, then who or what is experiencing it? This is the ego-death paradox. It challenges the idea that you are your mind, that your thoughts define your identity, that your memories, goals, opinions, and preferences are what make you. You. But in moments of deep meditation, grief, awe, or psychedelia, those structures can dissolve. The inner monologue goes quiet. Time loses shape. The boundary between self and world blurs, and yet something remains. A watcher, a witness, still somehow present. This paradox sits at the heart of many spiritual traditions. In Buddhism, the self is an illusion, a bundle of desires, perceptions, and stories that feel solid but have no core. In neuroscience, ego-death appears as a shutdown of the brain's default mode network, the region tied to self-referencing and identity. In psychology, it's sometimes described as ego dissolution, a loss of boundaries between the self and the external world. But the question remains, if the self can disappear, and awareness still exists, then what is the true self? Is you just a mask, a useful fiction, a character in a play you forgot was a play? And if so, what happens when you take the mask off? The ego-death paradox doesn't promise answers. It offers a doorway, not to knowing more, but to needing less identity, less control, less separation. Just breathe, just stillness, just being. So as you lie here now, with your thoughts gently fading into the dark, ask yourself, if you stop being you for a while, does that mean you've lost something? Or returned to something deeper? But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly vanish into. If your ego can dissolve, was it ever real? Let me know in the comments if anyone's still here to reply. The paradox we're about to explore is called the time loop paradox. It begins with a moment, just one. You blink, you breathe, and then it happens again, and again, and again. Not metaphorically, literally. You're caught in a loop. You wake up, walk through your day, fall asleep, only to wake up in the same moment, doing the same things, saying the same words, feeling the same thoughts. And you're aware of it. So here's the question. If time repeats endlessly, and you can't change anything. Does your awareness still matter? This is the time loop paradox. It appears in science fiction all the time, from Groundhog Day to Edge of Tomorrow. A character relives the same day until they break the cycle. But this paradox goes deeper than just repetition. It questions the purpose of choice, growth, and meaning, in a reality where the outcome is always the same. If you're stuck in a loop, can you still learn? Can you evolve, even if the world resets? Or is your awareness just a spectator watching the same play unfold, with no power to rewrite the script? Some physicists have proposed closed time-like curves, theoretical structures in space-time where events can loop back on themselves. In theory, you could return to your own past and live the same segment of time again. But if you did and couldn't change anything, is that time real, or is it an echo, a memory trapped in a loop? This paradox also touches something emotional. How many times have you felt like you're repeating yourself, making the same mistakes, having the same conversations, waking up to the same doubts? Are those loops external or internal? And if you can become aware of them, can you break them? Or does awareness just make the loop more vivid? So as you lie here now, at the edge of sleep and waking, ask yourself, if this night was repeating exactly as before, would you do anything differently? And if not, what does that say about free will? The time loop paradox reminds us that even if time is a circle, consciousness might still be the thread that notices the pattern. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly replay. If you knew tomorrow would be the same as today, what would you change about tonight? Let me know in the comments if we haven't had this conversation already. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Polsky Paradox. It begins with a ball, a simple billiard ball sitting near the edge of a wormhole. Now imagine this. The ball rolls forward and enters the wormhole. It travels back in time, emerging a few seconds earlier, just before it first approached the wormhole. But here's the twist. The ball knocks itself off course, preventing its original self from ever entering the wormhole at all. And now, the paradox. If the ball never enters the wormhole, then it can't go back in time to stop itself. But if it does enter the wormhole, it changes the past in a way that prevents itself from entering. So which is it? This is the Polsky Paradox, a real theoretical puzzle in physics that tests the limits of time travel and causality. It's named after physicist Joseph Polsky, who proposed the idea in the context of general relativity. It's not just science fiction. It's grounded in Einstein's equations, in the strange geometry of space-time. The paradox asks, can the universe allow situations where cause and effect collapse on themselves? Where an object can change the past in a way that makes its own action impossible? And if so, how does the universe resolve it? Some physicists believe the laws of reality would self-correct, that the ball would nudge itself but only slightly, altering its trajectory just enough to still enter the wormhole in a consistent timeline. This idea is called the Novikov self-consistency principle, the notion that events will always align so that paradoxes can't happen. But others argue that time might not be self-correcting, that multiple timelines could emerge, or that cause and effect could truly break. This paradox doesn't just challenge our understanding of time, it questions our very logic. Because if something can be its own cause, or its own undoing, then what is a beginning? What is an ending? So as you lie here now, letting your thoughts loop gently through time. Ask yourself, have you ever made a choice that somehow stopped you from making it? Ever spoken words you immediately silenced in your mind? Ever imagined a past that couldn't exist unless you had? The Polsky Paradox reminds us that time isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it curves in on itself, not to confuse us, but to show us how little we truly understand. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly trace. If the future can change the past, then who's really in charge of the present? Let me know in the comments, unless I've already stopped you from writing it. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Clock Reset Paradox. It begins with a clock, a digital one. It reads 0 o'clock, clean. Simple, the start of a new cycle, midnight. But here's the question. If a clock resets to 0, does that mean time itself has restarted? Or is it just pretending? This is the Clock Reset Paradox. It plays with a strange tension between symbols and reality, between measurement and meaning. Because clocks don't create time, they count it. And when they reset, they don't erase the past. They just start over. But we treat that reset like a beginning. New Year's, a birthday, a Monday morning, we reset the clock and expect change. We imagine that the past has been wiped clean, that we can begin again. But nothing has actually changed. So here's the paradox. If time is continuous, but our minds treat resets as real, does the illusion still shape reality? This paradox appears in physics and in human psychology. Physically, time flows forward, relentlessly, endlessly, without pause. There's no universal now, no cosmic reset button. But psychologically, we live by resets. We set deadlines, we track progress, we mark anniversaries and milestones, all based on artificial loops. And those loops feel real. They give us structure, hope, relief, but they also trap us because every time we reset the clock, we risk forgetting that growth is cumulative. That change doesn't start at 0. It builds moment by moment. This is why habits are so hard to break. We tell ourselves we'll start next week. We wait for the next 0. But time doesn't wait. It just keeps ticking, even when the numbers roll back to 0. So as you lie still now in this quiet space between yesterday and tomorrow, ask yourself, have I been living by the clock or by the moment? Do I wait for permission to begin again when I could begin now? The Clock Reset Paradox reminds us that even when the numbers say start, you've already begun. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly count. If the clock resets to 0, but you remember everything, is it really a new beginning? Let me know in the comments before the next reset catches up. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Simultaneity Illusion. It begins with a flash of light. 2 lightning bolts strike, one in front of you, one behind. You see them at the same time. You hear the thunder at the same time. You assume they happened simultaneously. But here's the paradox. What if someone else, standing in motion, saw them at different times? Would both of you be wrong? Or would both of you be right? This is the Simultaneity Illusion, a phenomenon in Einstein's theory of relativity. It reveals something strange, that 2 events that appear to happen at the same time in one frame of reference might not be simultaneous in another. Time, it turns out, is not absolute. It bends, stretches, and shifts depending on your position, your speed, your direction. So the idea of now, that comforting slice of time we all think we share, isn't universal. It's relative. This breaks our intuition. We think of moments as shared, a global now, a single ticking second that everyone experiences together. But the universe doesn't work that way. What's now for you might be before or after for someone else, moving just a little faster or standing in a different place. And yet, you still trust your own clock. You still feel like your version of the present is the real one. That's the illusion, because time is not a shared movie reel. It's more like a web, woven from countless points of view, each with its own thread of now. So what does that mean for reality? If simultaneity is an illusion, then maybe so is agreement. Maybe every observer lives in their own version of time, never quite matching anyone else's. The simultaneity illusion reminds us that time isn't just a ticking clock. It's a perception, a viewpoint, a story your brain tells you to make sense of motion and light. So as you lie still now, with no need to move or measure, ask yourself, who else might be living in a different now, right beside you? And if time isn't fixed, how can you ever be sure you're on time, but if you're still awake? Here's something to quietly shift your frame. If every now is different depending on where you stand, then what happens when you truly stand still? Let me know in the comments, unless we're not here at the same time. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Causal Patch Paradox. It begins with a horizon, not the kind you see at sunset, but a boundary in the fabric of space and time, one you can't cross, not because it's far away, but because it's outside your causal reach. In physics, this is known as a causal patch, the region of the universe from which signals can reach you, and to which you can send signals. It's your personal bubble of reality. Now here's the paradox. If events happen outside your causal patch and can never affect you in any way, do they still exist for you? This is the Causal Patch Paradox. It emerges from black hole physics and cosmology, where space can stretch so far and so fast that distant regions become forever disconnected. Imagine you're drifting near the edge of a black hole. Light from distant stars can no longer reach you, and your light can't reach them. From your perspective, those stars might as well be gone, but they're still out there, in someone else's patch. So whose version of reality is correct? The paradox deepens in cosmology. In an accelerating universe, there are entire galaxies, moving away from us faster than light, not by breaking speed limits, but because space itself is expanding. We will never see them again. They have exited our casual patch. So we ask, do those galaxies still count? If there's no possible way to observe, measure, or interact with something, is it part of your universe? Or does your reality begin and end with what you can touch? The Causal Patch Paradox isn't just about astrophysics. It's about perception, too. Your brain only processes what it senses. Everything else, distant countries, forgotten memories, even the future, exists only as imagined possibilities, outside your causal reach. So what is real? What's happening in someone else's mind? In a star system 10 billion light years away? In the version of you that never existed? If it can't affect you, does it matter? Or does reality only bloom where awareness shines? So as you lie here now, safe in your own causal patch, ask yourself, What parts of your own life have drifted beyond reach? Not because they're gone, but because you've stopped sending signals. The Causal Patch Paradox reminds us that not all walls are physical. Some are made of distance, of time, of attention. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly consider. If something is forever beyond your reach, does that mean it never touched you? Let me know in the comments before the signal fades. If simultaneity is an illusion, then maybe so is agreement. Maybe every observer lives in their own version of time, never quite matching anyone else's. The simultaneity illusion reminds us that time isn't just a ticking clock. It's a perception, a viewpoint, a story your brain tells you to make sense of motion and light. So as you lie still now, with no need to move or measure, ask yourself who else might be living in a different now right beside you. And if time isn't fixed, how can you ever be sure you're on time? But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly shift your frame. If every now is different depending on where you stand, then what happens when you truly stand still? Let me know in the comments. Unless we're not here at the same time. Paradox number 47, the Causal Patch Paradox. The paradox we're about to explore is called the Causal Patch Paradox. It begins with a horizon, not the kind you see at sunset, but a boundary in the fabric of space and time. One you can't cross, not because it's far away, but because it's outside your causal reach. In physics, this is known as a causal patch, the region of the universe from which signals can reach you, and to which you can send signals. It's your personal bubble of reality. Now here's the paradox. If events happen outside your causal patch and can never affect you in any way, do they still exist for you? This is the Causal Patch Paradox. It emerges from black hole physics and cosmology, where space can stretch so far and so fast that distant regions become forever disconnected. Imagine you're drifting near the edge of a black hole. Light from distant stars can no longer reach you, and your light can't reach them. From your perspective, those stars might as well be gone, but they're still out there in someone else's patch. So whose version of reality is correct? The paradox deepens in cosmology. In an accelerating universe, there are entire galaxies moving away from us faster than light, not by breaking speed limits, but because space itself is expanding. We will never see them again. They have exited our casual patch. So we ask, do those galaxies still count? If there's no possible way to observe, measure, or interact with something, is it part of your universe? Or does your reality begin and end with what you can touch? The Causal Patch Paradox isn't just about astrophysics. It's about perception, too. Your brain only processes what it senses. Everything else, distant countries, forgotten memories, even the future, exists only as imagined possibilities outside your causal reach. So what is real? What's happening in someone else's mind? In a star system 10 billion light years away? In the version of you that never existed? If it can't affect you, does it matter? Or does reality only bloom where awareness shines? So as you lie here now, safe in your own casual patch, ask yourself what parts of your own life have drifted beyond reach, not because they're gone, but because you've stopped sending signals. The Causal Patch Paradox reminds us that not all walls are physical. Some are made of distance, of time, of attention. But if you're still awake, here's something to quietly consider. If something is forever beyond your reach, does that mean it never touched you? Let me know in the comments. Before the signal fades, if you've made it this far, you might have fallen asleep and woken up again. Let us know in the comments. What time did you wake up? And if you'd like longer videos with no ads, consider becoming a member of the channel. It helps us create even more paradoxes to dream through and keeps your sleep undisturbed. Thank you for drifting with us.